Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roya Rahimi. I am the young adult librarian here at Los Angeles Public Library at West Valley Regional Branch in Reseda. I'm very thrilled to have our third mental health series in collaboration with LA County Psychological Association. And our today topic is understanding technology, how it affects us, and what we can do about it. I'm very honored to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Dustin Weissman. Dr. Weissman is a licensed clinical psychologist. He treats people struggling with problematic internet use, digital addiction, such as gaming addiction, social media addiction, smartphone, and porn addiction, men's issues, anxiety, life transitions, and mood disorders. Dr. Weissman also speaks professionally on internet addiction related topics. And thank you everyone for joining us today here on live stream at our YouTube channel in LAPL. I would like just to mention that you may chat live here and put your questions in the live chat if you have any questions. And at the end, if we have enough time, Dr. Weissman will go over them and answer them. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, thank you, Roya, for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you to the LA Public Library and to LA County Psychological Association for putting this all together. I love speaking on this topic. I'm also a member, the chair of Division 6 of CPA, California Psych Association, which is Division Media Technology. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and I'm thrilled to share what I've learned with you. So I have some slides I'm going to go through, and I know time is limited, so I might go a little fast on them, but please feel free to add, like Roy said, any questions you have in the chat box, and I will try to get to them. So my first question is, probably my only question actually, is going to be what happens when you unplug a mobile device? Now, imagine you're actually in the room with me. I can talk to you and hear your responses, and I'll say, yeah, no, okay, you're saying your answer. I hear you, but I can't. So the answer is nothing. Nothing happens when you unplug a mobile device. You know, old school technology, it was always plug in the wall. Video game consoles, TV, whatever it was, we got our power source from the wall. You take it out, it's off. You know, a father can come in the room, say, you're watching too much TV. Pull out the plug, TV's off. That doesn't work anymore. You're on a device too long. You pull out the plug, it has 68% charge left. Well, that didn't do anything. So it's definitely a new and different world for using technology. So the term of unplugging doesn't really apply anymore. It's more disconnecting. You know, and I love this quote from Kimberly Young, who's considered the mother of internet addiction, of disconnect to reconnect. So when we think about how we're spending our time online, you know, we have social media, smartphones, email, instant messaging, video streaming, online gambling, online gaming, pornography. There's a lot of different ways that people engage in the internet. So when we're looking at just social media, we'll pull that one for a second. There's 5 distinct ways that we engage with social media. It's a big one. It's really relevant. So one is we broadcast ourselves. We show what we want to the world, a very filtered view of what we want. So typically we're snipping, you know, just the highlights. And that's what you're seeing when you're engaging with social media is, wow, these people are doing great. Why is my life so crappy? But that's not the case. It's this snippet is great. You're seeing the highs, not the lows, and not really the in-between. So it's important to keep that in mind. Another action with social media engagement is receiving feedback from those posts. So there was a time, and kids are probably still doing this, where they post something and if it doesn't get enough feedback, comments or likes, then they would take the post down because they didn't deem it worthwhile, good enough. It wasn't high enough of a high to post. And if they had to pull it down, they felt pretty bad about it. Like, oh, no one likes me, or I'm unlovable because people aren't loving my post. There's a lot of association with the response to a post and their own self-worth. Social media platforms have adjusted this a little bit by filtering likes. So you don't get to see as many likes as there really are. You only get to see a snippet of them. Another one is observing, just the casual scrolling through through social media feeds and seeing what people are posting. Another one is the engagement, providing feedback to others. So commenting on somebody's, liking somebody's posts, reacting to it in some way. And the last one is comparing ourselves. You know, what we're experiencing with what they're experiencing. It's like, oh, wow, they look so great, but they had to go through 5 filters to look that great sometimes. So one thing that's really important to take into consideration with mobile devices, and this research is actually now a few years dated, but I think it was about 2018, that almost 1 out of 2, 45% of kids are reporting, teenagers in America are reporting that they're online almost constantly, which means that they're online during class. Now, COVID time, they were online for class, but this is pre-COVID time. And I think we're heading back into that direction of, you know, most schools are now in person again. So if you're considering that you have a class of 40 students, that maybe 18 of those students are online almost constantly through that class, it's going to affect their learning and their engagement with their teachers and everything. So yeah, moving on. Gonna take a little segue now to online gaming. So what are some of the motivations that people play video games? Well, there's four basic motivations. First one is curiosity, astonishment, and interest. You really get to experience a dynamic environment. You get cognitive stimulation, that's the second one. Enjoyment of a different lifestyle or even a different environment. So this environment here is a woman in a dress on a moon of Saturn. Like, you don't get to experience that in real life, but in a game you can. And the last one is recreational refreshment. This is a very popular reason that a lot of kids play. And I think I'd add for social factors. That's probably one of the more, I'd add a fifth now. This is from research, but if I was going to do it, I'd add a fifth of social interaction, because that's how a lot of kids communicate and engage with each other now, especially since the pandemic. People have been a lot more online, and they've gravitated and kept with those factors. Okay, so why do people play video games? Well, one is just to gain control over their environment. And this is something that you can pay attention to if you're in an environment that is chaotic and you don't have much control. Basically, every teenager everywhere, they don't have control of their environment. So they go to one where they do have control. And that gives them a sense of power. And because of that, they like being there. And they'll spend more time there because it works within the parameters. Another reason that you see probably a higher amount of people who are autistic spectrum disorder or who have ADHD is because it works within the confines of their, the way they work cognitively. So with ASD, they love to have rules and follow rules. And games have a lot of rules and parameters involved. Whereas the real world, too many options and it can be overstimulating. ADHD is more engaged because there's just so much cognitive stimulation, as I mentioned earlier. Another reason why people play video games is to vicariously experience something that can only be previously imagined. So if we go back actually to this, you can't live this. You can experience it online, but this isn't something that you would normally think of. Like, yeah, I'm gonna throw on a wedding dress and walk across the moon, barren wasteland, and take a view of Saturn while I'm doing it. That's not something we can just do, but we can vicariously experience it. All these amazing environments that are created by our software engineers up and down the state. We have that opportunity with video games. Another one is the competitive component. People love competition. That's why we have esports. People get to engage in competition against others. And if they do really well, then they can broadcast themselves on YouTube, or they can be broadcast on ESPN for one of those late night esports gaming competitions. They can go to arenas that are sold out and filled with people watching esports competitions. They can win money. They can be on teams. There's a lot involved in this. It's a very real thing. You can also vicariously live somewhere else, like a moon of Saturn, or even in another time. Maybe you want to go to a medieval era or an Egyptian era. You can do that, or the future. The last one is just to safely explore fantasy relationships or even regular relationships. This gives opportunity to everybody that they can go out and without worrying about what people are going to think of me, is what are they going to think of the persona I present through this avatar. And if they don't like it, I can just ghost them, which basically means shutting off all communication and move on. So looking at the reward system, what keeps people engaged into video games? Well, there's one very strong one right off the bat is quest completion and leveling up. And you level up by usually gaining experience. So in this, we have a scene depicted where a person is leveling up. Everybody's around clapping and cheering on, congratulations, you leveled up. And when this happens, we have a huge flow of dopamine. We feel really good. And we want to do it again. In the first few levels, it's really quick, easy level ups. It takes minutes sometimes to get to level 10, depending on the game. And once we go beyond that, it gets a little harder because if we kept it super easy, well, our satiation wouldn't really last. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But other aspects of leveling up in these games, you have the graphics reinforcement, you have the color, the sound, sometimes there's a blaring trumpet just announcing, and there's a lot of stimulation. And because of that, your brain is really engaged and lighting up. Also, there's a sense of feeling more powerful. The stronger you get in game, the more powerful you feel. Again, we go back to environments where people are coming from a place of not having much power, maybe getting bullied in school and resorting to video games because you feel good and strong there because you can do well at it. And it's not limited to teenagers. Adults play games and feel good too. Maybe you're in a job that you aren't really doing well at, or you have a boss that just keeps putting you down, but in a video game you can do really well, or be a guild leader and have a team underneath you. All right, so Kuhn and Galanot did really amazing study, and this is actually a picture from their study. This was back in 2014. They looked at brains with fMRIs, functional, fMRIs. And with that, they found that excessive game use over a long period of time, they looked at people that had 30 years of gaming experience, that it actually helped the brain in terms of if they were playing logic-based games and puzzle games, they would strengthen certain areas of the brain. However, the games that were more focused on action and role-playing, those contributed negatively to our brain development. Of course, that's what I like to play, so I was disappointed to learn that. But there's also some other negative contributions from excessive gaming that can affect memory, navigation, and perception of time, which is really perceived in the prefrontal cortex, specifically the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And when that part gets inhibited from excessive game use, it kind of goes with the old adage of time flies when you're having fun. But if you do it too much and you damage that part of your brain, then you really can have a warped perception of time, especially while you're gaming. So when somebody is gaming and it's been 2 hours and you tell them it's time to get off, they feel like they just started. And it doesn't regulate the same way. 5 minutes, all right, get off in 5 minutes. 5 minutes passes, they don't feel it. It seems like only 2 seconds had passed. So it's good to be aware of that if you're interacting with somebody who is gaming too long, that they don't perceive it that way because that part of their brain regulates time in a different way, at least when they're engaged in the activity. There's another study that's been going on. I think it's in its fourth to sixth year, somewhere in there. It's called the ABCD studies through the National Institute of Health. And it's going to be a 10-year longitudinal study following 10, or actually now about 11,000 participants. And they had an early finding that was released. I don't think I have a slide of it. I think it's just here. But in this finding, they found that those who spent more than 2 hours a day on screens, just in general screens, scored lower on their thinking and language tests. But brain scans of, okay, I guess let's see. Brain scans of 9 and 10-year-olds who spent 7 or more hours using electronics devices a day shows a premature thinning of their prefrontal, or of their cortex, not their prefrontal, just the whole cortex. So that does happen normally as we age. Our cortex does thin, but not that early. So they weren't able to say if this is a good or a bad thing. Perhaps we're evolving faster. My suspicion is that it's probably not a good thing. We probably want that to thin later in life. So not sure. The verdict's not out yet on that one. There have been some more updates on the studies, but I'm just going to leave it at that. And those are the main findings that I found that I wanted to share today. All right. Okay, so internet addiction. Okay, everybody's always wondering, what's involved in internet addiction? Well, internet addiction is basically 6 main factors. The first one is salience. So that's when our activity becomes the most important part of our life. You gotta have it. You make the big important thing, I have to do this, I have to game. I've got free time, I'm gonna game. Or I've got free time, I'm gonna shop online. I'm gonna use porn. I'm gonna do some gambling. Whatever the vice is, that's the first sign that we see, okay, there's probably a problem forming here. Another one is mood change. And that's how the person experiences the activity through ongoing involvement. And the third one is tolerance, which you're probably familiar with, building a tolerance to something. The more you use it, the more tolerance you have, so you don't have the same desired effect. We have that with medication, with drugs. Basically requires progressive lengths of time to get that same level of dopamine release in the brain. The fourth is withdrawal. So when you're not getting enough, that you have that detriment or perceived detriment when you're not meeting the desired requirement. The fifth one is conflict. This is going to be an inter or intrapersonal conflict, and it can be caused by a continual application of the activity. So you can see this most apparent in arguments with family or teachers or friends, or withdrawing from family, teachers, or friends, not engaging in life, and you start to see it causing problems in other areas. And the last one is relapse. We're familiar with relapse with AA and NA. That's the act of re-engaging in an activity, in an addictive activity, after demonstrating control over it. So it's understandable, expected, and common. So this is from a study that found, well, it was 76 college students in this study. 50% were female, 50% male. The mean age was 18.9, so almost 19 years old. And they were denied access to food for 3 hours, as well as denied access to their smartphones. And after the modest deprivation period, they were offered either a 100-calorie portion of their favorite snack or of their food. So they found that more of the participants preferred to have the smartphone than their food. So, in a sense, that's why I highlighted smartphones were more reinforcing than food. It kind of states a lot of, well, yeah, what's the priority for our youth? Okay, so the New York Times came out with this article, and this is a study that found an association between increased screen-based media and compared with the AAP guidelines, that there was a lower microstructural integrity of the brain where white matter tracks supporting language and emergent literacy skills in pre-K children were not as strong. So essentially, yeah, we had a negative association between screen time and white matter tracks. Now, white matter is extremely important for our functional activity in our brain. That's the myelin. It's the insulation, our FiOS, how strong, how quick our signals can get through the brain. So if they are thinning or weaker or just not as fast, then we're not going to be as quick. We'll be perceived as slower in our response time, which can then present as what? ADHD. So it is possible that ADHD is something that might be more of a symptom or a result of excessive screen time. And we're seeing kids using screens as young as babies. On that note, my recommendation is no screen time before age 3. And if you are going to have screen time, limit it to FaceTime with grandma. FaceTime video like this, video calls are fine. But beyond that, you really want to limit it. I know there's a lot of programming for kids that I'm not as worried about with TV, especially if they have good messages and music and you're stimulating other things. But in terms of giving them smartphones, that is something I would try to avoid at all costs. So any expecting parents out there, if you know of any expecting parents, or of course, I found this out when my younger child turned 3. It's like, why did I find this out now? I couldn't find this out 3 years ago. So take it for what it's worth. Okay, Netflix had this interesting tweet a while back in 2017 saying, "Sleep is my greatest enemy." This is from the CEO of Netflix. And well, Netflix is really good at keeping people awake longer than they intended. The problem is that we can experience sleep deprivation. And with sleep deprivation, we have neurological effects. One of those is decreased task-related activity. Another one is diminished activity in visual spatial attention tasks. Another is difficulty focusing, especially with distractions. And the last one I have is that it impairs the capacity to sustain attention over time. So, it's really important that we get good sleep. And if you ever have gone a day without sleep, then you know how fuzzy your brain feels. I did this once when a few years back when I went to Virginia to present, and I noticed it because I had taken a red eye, and I just figured I'll jump on their time zone when I got there. And thank goodness I wasn't presenting that day because my brain was not sharp. But once I got a good night's sleep, I was back on it. So it's something we can come back from. But if kids aren't getting good night's sleep and they're staying up late on their devices, which is called vamping, then they're not going to do well in school. Or adults staying up late, watching TV, streaming, on social media, then the next day it might affect your work. So the recommendation here is to put your phone on a charger, don't look at it for an hour before you go to sleep. Also on that note, if you struggle to sleep, don't use any devices in bed. Just train your brain that when your head hits that pillow, you're not doing anything else. If you're gonna do something else, do it outside of the bed. Okay, so I added some of these recently. These are my new additions, cryptocurrency addiction, because I figured, why not? And we're seeing a lot of people struggling with this. So I'm just gonna go over these kind of quickly, but I think it's relevant and important to talk about because there's a lot of people who are struggling with tying their mental well-being into the crypto market. So as it goes up, they feel great. As it goes down, they're not so great. So we'll see, just like any addiction, that people will have this pathological compulsion or obsession over it. If you've been around anybody who's invested in crypto, especially when it's doing well, it's all they talk about. And when it's not doing so well, hey, we haven't talked about crypto in a while. Don't get me, I don't want to get into it. Bring up NFTs and they'll really get upset. But we'll see the addiction when they're still doing this trading of cryptocurrency, despite having a lot of negative consequences. So still pouring money into it, hoping that, all right, it's gonna shoot up. It's basically gambling at that point, not in general, because a lot of people, myself included, will invest money in a cryptocurrency, hoping that it goes up, just like any investment. But the ones who are doing it more trading and seeing the negative results and still just kind of hoping, when it becomes too much, that's when we see it to be problematic. So there's some signs of cryptocurrency addiction I just want to throw in here. So we have unsuccessful attempts at stopping, thinking about the cryptocurrency, and you could change cryptocurrency with any other vice, whether it's an internet-related device, or not device, device, or alcohol, or drugs, whatever it might be. So these are signs of addiction. Thinking about it constantly, feeling guilty, shameful, or regretful, spending more time or money on it, hiding losses from loved ones, lying, stealing, or selling assets, as well as borrowing from people, knowing that you can't repay them, or hoping that, if it does well in the future, then I can repay you then. Spending money on cryptocurrency instead of responsibilities like food and bills, jeopardizing relationships, careers, or educational opportunities, difficulty concentrating on important activities. So the mind is just focused on that task, whatever the vice is, in this case, cryptos, and not focus on that project that's supposed to be done. loss of interest in non-related crypto activities, and difficulty relaxing or sleeping due to cryptocurrency. Okay, segueing into cyberbullying. So I mentioned there were more results from the ABCD study, so I did find this one. So in this, they found out of the 11,000, 10,414 were for part of the cyberbullying aspect of it. And so we had 7.6% reported that they had experienced suicidal thoughts or acts. That's a lot. In a classroom of, well, if it was a big classroom of 100, we'd have 7.6 people. But if we're looking at a classroom of 50, we have 3, or a classroom of 25, we have 1 or 2. So if you're thinking that you're looking at a classroom of students and there's 1 or 2 kids in there who are actively having suicidal thoughts, that's a lot. 8.9% reported being targets of cyberbullying, and 0.9 actually, almost 1%, actually reported that they were the cyberbullying other people, which a lot of times we don't recognize that when we're doing it to others. Okay, so I came up with 9 tips to reduce time online. I have a little video, but that's not going to play, so I didn't bother. So here they are. Find ways to interact with loved ones without technology. You can do that with reading a tangible book, explore nature, soak up some sun. Even 15 minutes will really help. Learn something new. I'm always talking with my patients about finding new hobbies, whether it's discovering old ones again or finding new ones. Meditation is fantastic. There's a free app called Insight Timer. Has over 100,000 free meditations, unless they've started charging. If you can do 5 to 15 minutes of meditation, I prefer the guided meditation a day. You'll really see strong and helpful results. Setting and working towards achievable goals. Now, the key word here is achievable. Has to be something that's within reason. Now, if you say, oh, I'm going to get my college education. No, okay, well, that's not really a short-term achievable goal. So perhaps I'm going to go enroll in college would be something better. Or apply for college. Track your time online. That's a good way to keep mindfulness around how much use you're having. Engage in sports and other outdoor activities. It's really, really important to be involved in something physical if you're able to. If you're not able to, then perhaps finding some other means, perhaps, which could be chess in the park or something along those lines. Maybe swimming, whatever it might be. So I mentioned Dr. Kimberly Young. She had a book called Caught in the Net. She had these strategies for really healthy internet use. So this isn't necessarily avoiding it, but this is when we're using it to be healthy about using it. So one is stick to a schedule. And for a lot of my patients, I recommend a certain time limit. I don't say, okay, do it from this time to this time, but I'll recommend, okay, we're going for 2 hours a day to 3 hours a day. So that means that you don't start a new activity after that 2 hour mark, and then you just get off. I like to give that buffer of time rather than saying it's been 2 hours, you have to get off. No, it's been an hour and 59 minutes. Go ahead, start a new game, watch a new episode. But it's been 2 hours and 1 minute. Don't start something new, just log off. Acknowledge change. This is something you can do with yourself as well as with others, is really to pay attention to any kind of efforts that have been made for positive change. So if you see somebody really putting the effort, give them that feedback, the positive feedback, or give yourself positive feedback if you're aware that, wow, I've done really a good job looking at my screen time, that I've decreased it. Monitor fees. A lot of different platforms, whether it's a gaming platform or a streaming platform or online shopping, they have fees. So pay attention to how much you're spending. So I guess with shopping, also spending, not just fees. And fourth one, maintain school work performance. So if you see that your performance starts to slip, then that's when you want to pull back on the screen time and really get back invested in, getting your grades or your projects completed for school or work. Rediscover hobbies, as I mentioned before. Increase in real life interactions. Go out, see people, hang out in real life. You can't give a high five to someone online, but you can in person. So I really encourage people to spend time with others in person. It's really helpful, especially now as we're more vaccinated. It's a little healthier to go out. Maybe not currently in this wave of COVID we have at this moment, or not. Depends on where you are. Depends on what time you're watching this video, if you're live streaming with me or if you're watching it later. But yeah, if you can, spend some time in person with people, especially if you can do it outside and playing a sport. That's a 3-for-1 win-win-win. Empathize with others' tech use. You see somebody struggling with their time online. A good one that comes to mind for me with this is I see my patients who have their friends they're gaming with online. And I'll suggest, well, go do something with them in person. Now, a lot of time they've met friends online who don't live nearby. So that does make it challenging, but you can get creative. Perhaps doing a video call while you guys are doing something together outside, I don't know, like juggling soccer balls, for example. Be aware of the temptation. Oftentimes there's a lot of triggers. Perhaps you're just walking around and see people on their phones. That's a trigger. Maybe you hear a certain jingle. That's a trigger. Maybe you see someone that reminds you of something. That could be a trigger. So being aware of those things and that temptation is there, and that's okay, but how to respond to it. Spending time with loved ones kind of goes hand in hand with the increasing real life interactions. And then self-reflection, being mindful of progress made. Okay, now I've been talking a little bit more skewed towards technology use not being great, but no technology use is also bad. We want some technology use, so it's not all bad. It's actually helpful in a very connected online world to be involved in the internet, to be involved in technology. We want to, because that's where the world is. That's where we're at right now in our society. And in this study, they talk about the Goldilocks effect, showing that moderate use of technology, about 1 to 2 hours per day on weekdays and slightly more on the weekends, was not intrinsically harmful, but it can actually be helpful. So I want to make sure that my presentations and what I'm talking about does not come across as technology use is bad. Technology use is good. It fosters a lot of great things, like me talking to you right now. So we want to use technology. We just want to do it like everything else in life, in balance and moderation. So I have some recommended readings here. And the first one is iGen by Jean Twenge. She wrote a very popular article in The Atlantic talking about screen time. The book iGen I love. It covers different generational differences and how the 2011, when iPhones became mass owned, they came out in 2007, but by 2011, that's when a lot of people had them. And that's when we saw a huge change in how people were doing. Homicide rates went way down, but suicide rates went up. So we stopped hurting each other and started hurting ourselves. Depression went up, anxiety went up, cyberbullying obviously went up. There's a lot of problems that started happening around that time. But some other stuff was delayed. Kids started driving later. Like I said, less violence, but also less drug use. So people were being healthier, more conscious for their own physical health, but not as much mental health. Irresistible, I used to say, is a book that if I was going to write a book, it would be very similar to that one. I really, really love the way Adam Alster put it together. Caught in the Net, I referenced here briefly, by Dr. Kimberly Young. Ready Player One, I threw in there because I just love it. And it kind of covers how the world could be in the future if we're all connected on VR and technology does progress the way that Meta wants it to progress. So that one's more of a fun one. The Art of Screen Time by Anya Kamenetz. I like that one because she approaches it with a journalistic perspective. So she's not really coming from the psychological, educational, which is in there because she did her job as a researcher, or as a journalist. But she really comes across from a different angle, which I found refreshing. And then here's some more: The Craving Mind, Raising Human Beings, The Organized Mind, and Unselfie. So these are all also very good books. And then another resource, I did 19 episodes on a podcast, CyberSense Power Podcast, available for free. So if you like some of the stuff that you heard, most of them involve interviews with people, or half more, sorry, interviews with people, half or more article. So I'll find an article and I'll discuss it. So you're more than welcome to seek that out for free. You can find it on any platform that does podcasts: Apple, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker. Episode 2, which I mentioned here, is actually me interviewing my daughter when she was 6 on what it was like for her to have screen time limits. So that was a really interesting one. It's a fun one. Fun for me to do. Okay. I zipped through that super fast so that we have plenty of time for questions. So feel free to post any questions that you might have in the chat box. And I'm going to see if I skipped over anything that I want to go back to. Okay. I think I found your guys' questions. Or comments. Okay. Let's see. So just in case, that's funny. All right. Let's see. What harm due to overuse of digital tech did, I cannot pronounce his name, they register and report? That's a tricky one. You're asking me to I gave the highlights on that article, but they didn't really cover that. That was not the aim of their article. The article is talking about the good things, what's helpful for tech use, because there's a lot of literature out there on overuse of technology and the detrimental effects. Their goal was to showcase the positive effects of screen use and screen time. So I don't think there would be anything negative in that particular article. Anybody have any other questions? You can just put them right there in the chat box. Okay, let's see. I'm going to talk about nomophobia. Anything more specific with it, or where's the comment? Oh, there it is. All right. And the other New Day phobia is related tech. Okay, so yeah, like FOMO and so forth. So nomophobia is, yeah, just, I believe, the fear of being disconnected and not with your phone. And we have FOMO, which is fear of missing out. Not sure what other ones come to mind in terms of modern day phobias with regards to cell phones and technology, but those two go hand in hand. And I'm not sure exactly what you want me to address with them. So, yeah, I think we are very attached to our devices, and to the point where we're used to them being in our pockets, and you can have the phantom vibrations because your body is classically conditioned to feel the vibration, and it will react before there's even a buzz. But without it, then yeah, we can definitely feel detached, and it can raise our anxiety because, again, the fear of missing out, whether it's related to work or social or just something that happens. A lot of news, the news will have a lot of scary things in it, and if you feel like you missed out on it, or you're not currently up to date, if something bad is going on, then you might feel in danger, which rationally we know we're not. but irrationally we react to it.
Thank you so much. Oh, there's another question.
Yeah, do you consider online creative work to be part of the 2-hour-a-day limit? My son does a lot of graphics. No, if he's doing graphic design for 2 hours a day, or as part of that, I wouldn't consider it. I think for the 2 hours, you're looking more at something that's highly engaging, like social media, gaming, pornography, gambling, something that's a lot more interactive with online community. Video streaming and TV watching, in this case, graphic design, I put a much lower level of screen technology engagement. Not all screen time is created equal because our brain's not going to react to it in the same way. Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. It was very educational and eye-opening for, I'm sure, a lot of us. I'm sure also so many of us relate to this in one level or another. And thank you for covering a lot of areas in technology addiction in a very short, limited time. And thank you for your time. I'm sure everybody benefits from your talk. And please feel free, everyone who is watching now or is going to watch later the recorded video, to share this video with your friends and loved ones so that they can also benefit from this wonderful presentation. Thank you. And I would like just to mention that our series will continue, and our next topic, coping with mass violence, by Dr. Richard Espinoza, ID, will be on August 16 at 4 p.m. here on our YouTube channel, LAPL's YouTube channel. And thank you again, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.